What is up, guys? Welcome to Anxiety Land. My name is Matt Jones. I am a stand-up comedian and actor, and this is a show about how I talk about getting over anxiety. Imagine if you watch Stranger Things and this is a show about aliens, and in it you will see, you just proceed to tell what the show's about. I talked about the nightmare of social anxiety. That's what we're going to be talking about this week. What got me on the train of trying to get over anxiety and doing all these crazy things to try to overcome it was I was involved in a campus ministry called Campus Crusade for Christ, and the leader of it would always smell alcohol on my breath. And so I remember he told me, he was like, "Matt, you smell like King Cobra. I think you need a therapist." And I took his advice and I went and I got a therapist. And here's something that I wish people would have told me before getting a therapist. Don't make your therapist a hot woman, because it's gonna be hard for you to share certain things. Now, at that time, there were two therapists that I could choose from, okay? There was a male therapist and there was a female therapist. And when I went to the male therapist, he was a really cool guy. He was actually a Christian therapist. And I remember he put his hand on my shoulder. And we had one meeting together and he goes, "All right, I want you to picture what Jesus is doing with his hand on your shoulder." And I was like, "Oh, he's pissed off at me." And then he was like, "That's probably not Jesus." And then he's like, "Do it again." And then so I would visualize this and I was like, he's still kind of mad, but not as mad. And he's like, "Okay, we're getting somewhere." And his whole theory was your conception of yourself came from your conception of who God is and how God sees you. And so he was a good therapist. He was very trained. He knew a lot about Freud and he was a good therapist. He was a trained professional therapist is my point. I went to a second therapist and I remember my idiot 23-year-old brain took over and I was like, "She's hot." And so I remember when I went in there, I was so stoic because no guy wants to open up to a really beautiful woman and just make himself look weak. So we're sitting across from each other. It's almost like a Mexican standoff. And she's like, "So Matt, what's going on with you?" And I'm like, "Nothing. What's going on with you? Especially after we leave here. You going anywhere?" And she's like, "No, you can talk to me. Why are you here? And why are you here?" Just you know what I mean? You can't open up because it's like your traumatic brain is like, if you open up, she's gonna think you're gay. And so you're just you're trying to impress this woman and you're trying to make her think that you're not a dork. It's like, if you open up, she's gonna think you're a loser. So you're just sitting there just trying to look cool, even though she knows you're in there because there's something wrong with the way you're thinking. So safe to say, at the end of the session, because she was a good therapist, I was like, just crying, And so she gave me this task when we were in therapy, and she hands me a jar of marbles. And I remember she said to me, "Okay, I want you to imagine that this jar of marbles is your anxiety. And I want you to reach in there and take these marbles out. And as you're taking them out, I want you to imagine that this is the anxiety that's stored in your body. And I want you to imagine that anxiety leaving your body." So for some reason, it actually worked. I'm sitting in there and I'm like, "This is stupid" at first. And then I'm like, "Dumb exercise." And then as finally, once I do it, I'm like, "Yeah." Now, the problem was I had never opened up to anybody in my entire life. And I think that's a lot of men. You don't ever really say what it is you really feel and what it is you really think. And the first time you do that, especially with a beautiful woman, and she gives you unconditional positive regard, your dumb brain starts to be like, "She likes me. That's why she looks forward to seeing me every week." And I'm thinking that, but really, it's just that she's a therapist and she's giving you unconditional positive regard. Now, I'm not a Catholic, okay? I'm just a non-denominational Christian or whatever. But the thing about going to a priest, just the idea of going and confessing your darkest, innermost thoughts to somebody behind a Wizard of Oz veneer, and they're just like, there's something empowering about that. Yesterday I was at the Grand Canyon with my brother-in-law, and he was lurking over the edge, and I just wanted to blow really hard and just knock him off. And the priest being like, "Yeah, I've thought that before too." And you're like, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. I'm a human. This is okay, And there's something about showing your core, authentic, vulnerable self to someone and them not judging it. For some reason though, when you do talk therapy, especially if you've never done it before, it's kind of like uncorking the champagne bottle and then stuff starts bubbling over because you don't realize all this crazy anger and angst that you've held inside for so long. And it was overwhelming for me whenever I first started going to therapy. Like, it got me in touch with my feelings in a way to where, especially as a man, I was like, I'm not comfortable with this. And my drinking actually temporarily got worse. At the time, whenever I was in Chicago, I would actually go and walk around the park after therapy, and I would drink out of a flask, and then I would go and walk around the park. And I remember one time I came across a homeless man, and he was one of the wisest people that I'd ever met. And he's like, man, he goes, you got two choices in life. He goes, you got the narrow road or you got the wide gate. And he didn't even know that I was drinking. He goes, a lot of mother on that path. So it's like the cussing preacher, you know what I mean? And I was like, yeah. And so I remember that was like kind of the wake up call to where I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be self-medicating with alcohol anymore. People who walk through parks at night get a really bad rap, okay? I was walking through a park at night and I was just sad. I wasn't looking to hurt anybody. There was no switchblade activity involved, I was walking around. Usually those two things are synonymous. But those were the days, man. I didn't really exactly know how to handle my emotions, so I would drink more. And so what ended up happening is I keep going back to therapy, and this woman is giving me unconditional positive regard. And since I'd never had that in the opposite sex at that age, I remember I started getting very attached. And I prepared this speech for her. And I remember one day when I went into therapy, I was like, listen, I know you like me. I know you do. And I know that you're my therapist. And she was like, you're bipolar. That was like her response. And so I remember it was kind of like a Nurse Ratched situation to where she actually recommended me to a psychiatrist. And I don't know if this was her boyfriend, because this guy like really wanted to drug me up. His name was, I don't even want to say his name, but it was like this really tall, Boris, kind of like Eastern European guy. And I remember he was like, okay, you have fluctuations and mood swings and a lot of stuff going on with you, so we'll just give you tons of drugs. He didn't say that, but they basically gave me lithium. And I remember my friend was kind of like the ghost of Christmas past that came up to me and he was like, dude, do not take lithium. Just go through my Facebook pictures and you'll see how much weight I gained. And I clicked through his Facebook pictures and it was like a flip book of him getting fatter from lithium. And so I was like, I don't know if I want to take this stuff. But they put me on lithium, and then he gave me a cocktail of clonazepam, which is Klonopin, which is kind of like Xanax. And then I believe it was Zoloft. So it was Zoloft, lithium, and clonazepam. And clonazepam is an anti-anxietal. It's kind of like Xanax into where like it's a muscle relaxer. So you take it and you're just like, ah. And so I don't know if this was my therapist's boyfriend, because it felt like he was trying to euthanize me. He's like, you will take lots of pills and you will feel nothing. That was the vibe that I was getting from this guy. So the problem with Klonopin is when I took it, it would make me really relaxed, but also really emotional. You're kind of just walking in a drugged out state. It's like you're giving embarrassing best man speeches. Like, Kelly, I know you're getting married, but I want you to take care of that bastard. And then you just start crying for no reason. It makes you very, very emotional. So I'm going through talk therapy and it is helping, but what it is it's resurfacing stuff that I've never really wanted to deal with. And the psychiatrist is constantly giving me this stuff. And at the time, I'm going on dates with women, but I'm falling in love super quick. So it's like just being crazy, being like, I think I love you, and then just getting flowers on like the third date. Like not knowing how to react in the world, because I just feel so much emotional upheaval going on in my brain. And I remember I got a call from my mom, and my mom was like, honey, I don't think you're bipolar. I just don't want to think of my son as being bipolar. And it's funny because that could be like really bad advice, like you're literally bipolar, and your mom's like, but you're mommy's little boy, so are you really bipolar? So I start to really consider the fact that maybe this is a misdiagnosis, and my brain is just in a pretzel. It was just kind of a little thought, but I'm like, maybe I'm not really bipolar. So I start doing my own research, and I start looking at people who had quote unquote overcome bipolar or who were misdiagnosed. And the first thing that I noticed was there were some really out there stories. You would hear people say things like, I used to be bipolar, but then I started going to a drum circle and now I'm not bipolar anymore. And it's like, yeah, it sounds like a really bipolar thing to say and do. Like, you're still bipolar, dude. You went to a drum circle. And then you hear like other things. Like, I remember the most interesting thing that I heard was that sometimes what's labeled as bipolar could be an omega-3 fatty acid deficiency. Now, omega-3 fatty acid is fish. So I go to Walgreens and I take omega-3 fatty acids, and almost immediately I feel better, because up to that point, I had hardly ever eaten fish in my life. I just didn't like it. But there was like this calming of my brain, and it was like the brain chemistry started to come together. And I remember thinking, this is crazy. How many bipolar people are out there just needing a piece of salmon? Like, it's just some guy like in a bank, like, I'll do it. And he's just holding him up at gunpoint. It's like, hey, can we get this guy a piece of fish? Like, it really was the thing that started to narrow out my brain chemistry. My next step was I wanted to get off the bipolar medication, and I remember telling my therapist, I don't think I'm gonna take this stuff anymore. And at the time, she was like, no, you need it. But I think she was just afraid that I was gonna, like, the proposals were gonna start coming back. I'm like gonna be like, yeah, you like me, you wanna date me, you sit here and listen to what I'm saying. I think she was afraid that that was gonna come back. So I stopped taking the medication. And I remember my psychiatrist went on vacation, and he left me with another psychiatrist's number. I don't know if this guy was really a psychiatrist, but he goes, Matt, if you need to call and talk to me about the medication and how you're adjusting to it, then just call me and let me know. So at this point, I had gotten off Zoloft, I had gotten off Klonopin, and I'm like, I just need to get off lithium for bipolar. And it was this guest psychiatrist. And when I call him, he sounds exactly like the other guy. He sounds like he's in the Russian mob. And then he's like, no, lithium, it's just salt. That's all it is, it's just salt. So you can stop taking it because all it is salt. It's like lithium is a drug, it's not just salt. And by the way, if you just cold turkey quit your medication, it can kill you. And so I was like going crazy, tearing up my apartment. And then it was like, the easiest visual that I can give you is, I think it's in social studies or geology or geography, one of those. You learn about this thing called continental drift, to where the states, like, it's like tectonic plates of the states are like rubbing up against each other, and it kind of creates like an earthquake. It felt like that was happening in my brain, and I could just feel everything readjusting. So I went completely insane for 3 days, and then after the storm settled, it was like springtime again. And I can honestly say I didn't have those bipolar symptoms anymore. It was literally fish oil. So, what am I saying? I am saying that talk therapy helps. It works. It's good. It helped me to discover things about myself. There is power in confession when you confess to someone, and it's really good for a therapist because they're trained to not respond too crazy. So there's a power in saying things that you carry with you, whether that's shame, that's trauma, whatever it is. But what also happens is if you go to a psychiatrist, which I'm also not against, you can get doped up, because you have to realize in Western society, in all societies, we're trying to sell people a product. And just as the food, companies want to sell you their product, drug companies want to sell you their product. They're like, only we can fix it. And it made me a mess. So long story short, I got off all the medications. I completely quit therapy because I thought I was good to go. And I moved to Los Angeles, California to pursue a career in stand-up comedy and acting. And when I got here, I discovered something that changed my life even to this day. And it's something that teaches you how to be your own therapist, which I'm still a proponent for, and it is called cognitive behavioral therapy. And that's what I'm gonna be talking about in the next episode. So guys, if you liked this, that's just kind of my story, some of the stuff that I was going through. I'm gonna really start to break apart the things that I did, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, pickup artistry, self-hypnosis, healers, all these weird fringy things, scream therapy, 12-step, all of it. I'm gonna be going through it. I'm gonna be breaking it down, how it applies to anxiety, what I learned, how it screwed up my life even more, because some of these things legitimately like messed up my life. If you guys like this, make sure you subscribe, okay? Make sure you like the video to boost the algorithm, and then also make sure that you leave a comment because that helps us. This has also been brought to you by Vesby. Vesby is an app that you can download in the App Store right now. It is a social networking app, but you guys can connect with me on a deeper level there, so choose. We're gonna have merchandise maybe in the next episode. I don't know, but it's coming, and I'm letting you guys know. So stay tuned. We have new episodes every single week. It's been Anxiety Land. I'm Matt Jones. God bless you.